They say Hollywood is a dream factory, but for every polished premiere, every dazzling smile on a red carpet, there's another side hidden beneath the golden glow. A side filled with strange rituals, odd obsessions, and stories so bizarre you'd think they were made up. Except they're not. This isn't about rumors or urban legends. What you're about to hear are real, confirmed, and often forgotten stories buried beneath the glitz of old Hollywood. The stars may have seemed perfect on screen, but off-screen, some were downright strange. Eccentricities ran wild, superstitions ruled lives, and more than one legend left behind a legacy so odd, it feels like fiction. We're taking you deep into the secret drawers of Tinseltown's weirdest past, from actors who feared mirrors, to directors who filmed in graveyards for luck, and screen sirens with rituals so strange they'd make today's tabloids blush. And no, this isn't satire. These stories happened. And the best part? Every single one is totally true. So sit back, because once we open this vault, you won't believe what crawls out. Let's dive into the 19 most bizarre stories from old Hollywood, the kind that didn't make the headlines, but should have. Ready for the first strange tale? Number 1. Clark Gable's dentures nearly killed a co-star. To millions, Clark Gable was the epitome of masculine charm, the swaggering Rhett Butler of Gone with the Wind. But behind that dashing smile, a full set of false teeth. And in one terrifying moment on set, those teeth became the stuff of nightmares. By the 1930s, Gable had already lost most of his teeth due to a combination of gum disease and poor dental care, common at the time, even for stars. He wore dentures, carefully crafted to preserve his Hollywood perfect image. But no one on set of Call of the Wild in 1935 could have predicted just how dangerous that dental secret would become. During an intense kissing scene with co-star Loretta Young, Gable's dentures came loose, mid-kiss, and nearly lodged in her throat. Loretta gasped and choked, forcing crew members to rush in. The scene was halted. The cast was shaken. Young never spoke about it publicly, but the story spread like wildfire behind the studio gates. What's more disturbing? Loretta Young would later adopt a daughter in secret, whom many believe was the result of that same film shoot with Gable. The scandal was buried for decades. So next time you think of Clark Gable's smirk, remember, it was detachable and nearly deadly. Number 2. Tala Bankhead's wardrobe malfunction was entirely intentional. Tala Bankhead didn't just live on the edge, she was the edge, known for her razor-sharp wit, heavy southern drawl, and refusal to follow any rule, on screen or off. Bankhead was the kind of woman who made directors nervous and censors sweat. But perhaps her most infamous quirk? She hated underwear, and she made it everyone's problem. On the set of Alfred Hitchcock's Lifeboat, 1944, Bankhead's eccentricity reached its theatrical peak. Filming took place on a confined set, literally a lifeboat. Cast and crew were crammed together in tight quarters. When Bankhead climbed in and out of the boat, well, let's just say the camera operators got more than they bargained for. Reports circulated that she wasn't wearing any undergarments beneath her costume. Studio executives were horrified. A production assistant was sent, reluctantly, to ask the actress if she might consider, for the sake of decency and the camera crew, putting on some panties. Bankhead's response? "Darling, I'm wearing a wig, aren't I?" She refused to change. Hitchcock, amused and perhaps slightly terrified, let it slide. The scene was reshot carefully, avoiding any indecent exposure. But the story lived on, whispered through the halls of 20th Century Fox like an unkillable punchline. Tala didn't care for Hollywood's rules. She made her own, and she never, ever wore a bra. Number 3. Howard Hughes stored his own urine in bottles for years. Before tech billionaires and reclusive moguls became commonplace, there was Howard Hughes, the original eccentric tycoon. Film producer, aviation pioneer, and at one point the richest man in America, Hughes was as brilliant as he was broken. And his descent into paranoia is one of the most bizarre and thoroughly documented stories in Hollywood history. By the late 1950s, Hughes had retreated from public life almost entirely. The man who once romanced Katharine Hepburn and funded epic productions like Hell's Angels became a germaphobe so extreme he wore tissue boxes on his feet and avoided human contact at all costs. But perhaps the strangest and most unsettling habit of all? He began storing his own urine in glass bottles, hundreds of them. Hidden away in his darkened Las Vegas hotel suite, Hughes refused to throw anything out. His fingernail clippings, his used tissues, and rows upon rows of bottles filled with what he believed was valuable medical information, his own bodily waste. At one point, his aides reported he refused to cut his hair or fingernails, sitting naked in a room that hadn't been cleaned in months, surrounded by jars of urine and mumbled orders. This wasn't mere gossip. After his death in 1976, investigators found the evidence firsthand. What they discovered wasn't the glamorous innovator of Hollywood's golden age, it was a deeply disturbed man buried alive in his own compulsions. Howard Hughes was a genius. He was also, by the end, a prisoner of his own mind. And his legacy remains one of Hollywood's most haunting, cautionary tales. Nubs number 4. Fatty Arbuckle's haunted hotel room became a Hollywood curse. Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle was once one of the highest-paid silent film stars in the world, but his career and life took a dark and bizarre turn in 1921 during a scandal that shook the foundations of Hollywood. The alleged crime? The suspicious death of actress Virginia Rappe after a party in Arbuckle's suite at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco. Though Arbuckle was eventually acquitted after 3 grueling trials, his career never recovered. But the scandal didn't just destroy his stardom. It birthed a curse, because the hotel room where it all went down, room 1219, would go on to earn a reputation that creeped out guests and employees for decades. Maids refused to clean it alone. Guests reported hearing sobbing, screaming, and the sound of phantom parties long after midnight. Some claimed they saw a woman in 1920s clothing standing by the window before vanishing into the walls. One guest said the lights in the room flickered violently whenever someone mentioned Arbuckle's name aloud. The management tried rebranding the room. Then they removed the number entirely. But it didn't help. Paranormal enthusiasts began showing up just to sleep in room 219, and many didn't last the night. Was it guilt? Was it grief? Or just Hollywood's favorite ghost story? Whatever the answer, Fatty Arbuckle's cursed hotel suite became a chilling footnote in an already tragic downfall. And yes, the room still exists. Number 5. Hedi Lamar invented a secret weapon while soaking in a bubble bath. To the public, Hedi Lamar was the embodiment of exotic beauty, a screen siren who captivated audiences in the 1940s with her elegance and mystery. But behind those dazzling eyes hid one of the most brilliant and bizarre minds in all of Hollywood. Unbeknownst to many, Lamar had a passion for science. But she didn't just dabble in it. She invented. And her most famous creation? A frequency-hopping signal designed to prevent enemy ships from jamming Allied torpedoes during World War II. The idea would later become the foundation for modern Wi-Fi and Bluetooth technology. But here's where the story gets truly bizarre. She conceived the entire concept while soaking in her bathtub, surrounded by suds and soap bubbles. Working with avant-garde composer George Antheil, Lamar used principles from player pianos, yes, the musical kind, to design a communication system that could jump frequencies in a way the Nazis couldn't decode. She scribbled designs on notepads and napkins between takes on set, even using lipstick to mark up early drafts, all while still performing as one of MGM's leading ladies. The Navy didn't adopt the invention until years later, but by then, Lamar had already walked away from the spotlight, never fully recognized for her revolutionary work. In fact, she never earned a single dollar from the technology that would one day power the smartphone in your pocket. A pinup girl who helped win the war from her bathroom. Only in Hollywood. 6. Bela Lugosi slept in his Dracula cape and wanted to be buried in it. Few figures in film history are more hauntingly iconic than Bela Lugosi in Dracula, 1931. With his thick Hungarian accent, piercing stare, and slow, deliberate cadence, Lugosi didn't just play Dracula, he became him. And some say he never truly stopped. Even after filming ended, Lugosi was rarely seen without elements of his Count Dracula costume. According to studio insiders, he would often sleep in his black cape and kept it draped across his private dressing chair. Whether it was for comfort, branding, or a psychological blurring of fantasy and reality, no one knew for sure. But the image of the legendary actor curling up in his cape at night became the stuff of Hollywood whispers. Things took a stranger turn toward the end of his life. Struggling with morphine addiction, faded fame, and loneliness, Lugosi grew increasingly obsessed with death, and with the character that had defined and ultimately trapped his career. He once told a close friend, "There is no Lugosi, there is only Dracula." And when he died in 1956, his final wish? To be buried in his Dracula cape. His family honored the request. Bela Lugosi was laid to rest wearing the same flowing black garment he had worn on screen, forever immortalized as the Prince of Darkness, even in the grave. A publicity stunt? A delusion? Or a man embracing the only identity he had left? No one knows, but if you visit Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, you'll find his tomb, and you might wonder who really lies inside. 7. Marlene Dietrich brought her own sewing machine to the front lines of war. When it came to glamour, few names matched Marlene Dietrich, a smoky-voiced, androgynous-style icon who mesmerized audiences in both Berlin and Hollywood. But beneath the polished facade was a woman full of contradictions, and perhaps none more bizarre than her insistence on traveling with her personal sewing machine, even into combat zones. During World War II, Dietrich didn't just support the troops from afar. She joined the USO tours, bringing her sultry cabaret act directly to the front lines of North Africa and Europe. She slept in tents, endured frostbite, dodged bullets. But no matter the setting, one thing remained constant: her small, black Singer sewing machine. She insisted on tailoring her own stage costumes, down to the last sequin. Between shows, she would be found stitching hems, adjusting seams, or reworking silk gowns by lantern light in muddy encampments, surrounded by soldiers. It was said she kept her makeup and ammunition in the same kit. Once, a colonel reportedly asked her, "Why the sewing machine?" Dietrich replied without missing a beat, "Darling, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die in couture." The image of a world-famous actress threading needles on a battlefield is so absurd, so jarring, and yet entirely true. Marlene Dietrich was a legend of contradictions, a femme fatale with a soldier's grit, and apparently a seamstress with a death wish. Number 8. Montgomery Clift memorized entire scripts, even for other people's roles. Montgomery Clift was one of the most gifted actors of the Golden Age, a brooding, sensitive performer who brought a new kind of emotional depth to the screen. But behind that soft voice and soulful stare was a man tormented by anxiety, trauma, and an obsession with perfection that bordered on the pathological. Clift's commitment to method acting was legendary. He would dissect every line, every breath, every comma in a script. But what most people didn't know? He didn't just memorize his own lines, he memorized everyone's. During the filming of A Place in the Sun, 1951, Clift stunned his co-stars by mouthing their lines along with them. Perfectly timed, without error, as if he were controlling the entire scene. It made some actors uncomfortable. Others were in awe. But Clift couldn't stop himself. He claimed it helped him understand the emotional rhythm of the scene. This obsession extended beyond the camera. Crew members recalled Clift staying up all night, alone in his dressing room, reciting monologues over and over, even practicing his co-star's blocking. When asked why, he said, "I want to feel every heartbeat in the room." After his horrific car accident in 1956, his compulsions grew worse. He became more withdrawn, more obsessive, and even more exacting with his scripts. Many say he never recovered mentally, continuing to isolate himself and rehearse into the early hours, even when no filming was scheduled. Clift's performances were electric, but the price? A haunted mind trapped in loops of memorized pain. 9. Joan Crawford forced her children to call her Mommy Dearest, even off camera. Joan Crawford was the embodiment of Hollywood glamour, the arched eyebrows, the ice-cold stare, the velvet voice. But beneath the polished surface was a woman consumed by control and an obsession with appearances that turned terrifying behind closed doors. Much has been said about Crawford's parenting, especially after her adopted daughter Christina published the explosive memoir Mommy Dearest in 1978. The book alleged emotional abuse, physical punishments, and a household that felt more like a prison than a home. But perhaps the strangest and most unsettling detail? Crawford allegedly forced her children to call her Mommy Dearest at all times. Not Mom, not Mother, always Mommy Dearest, even at breakfast, even when asking to go to the bathroom, even in front of guests. According to Christina, failure to use the proper title could lead to explosive rage or punishment. Crawford reportedly said it preserved respect and dignity in the house. But others believed it was her way of turning real life into a performance, one where she was always the star and the children were cast members. This fixation on control went further. Crawford color-coded hangers, scrubbed her children's hands raw if they touched walls. And of course, the infamous no-wire hangers incident, immortalized in the film version of Mommy Dearest, was allegedly just the tip of the iceberg. To outsiders, Joan Crawford was elegance incarnate. To those inside her mansion, she was the director of a real-life horror film, one where the script was terrifyingly real. Number 10. Orson Wells once finished a movie using a hand puppet for a missing actor. Orson Wells was a genius, the kind of genius that turned Citizen Kane into a cinematic masterpiece. But he was also chaotic, brilliant, erratic, stubborn, and often operating on a budget of zero. Which brings us to one of the strangest behind-the-scenes stories in film history. In the 1970s, Wells was working on a low-budget experimental film titled The Other Side of the Wind. It was a bizarre, meta-fictional take on fame, masculinity, and the death of old Hollywood. Naturally, things went off the rails. The actor Rich Little, yes, the impressionist, had a significant role in the movie. But halfway through filming, he disappeared. He either quit or was fired. No one agrees on which. Wells, faced with massive delays and no money to reshoot, refused to recast or scrap the scenes. So what did he do? He used a hand puppet. According to crew members, Wells filmed certain angles of conversations where Rich Little's character would appear off-screen, or, in some scenes, replaced by a sock puppet shaped vaguely like a person. Wells would even hold the puppet himself and improvise lines to match what he needed. One assistant said it was like watching The Muppet Show crash into Citizen Kane. When asked why he wouldn't just replace the role, Wells reportedly shouted, "Because I understand the puppet better than I understood the actor." Decades later, when the film was finally completed and released posthumously in 2018, the puppet scenes were either cleverly cut or reshot, but the legend remains. Only Orson Wells could turn a vanishing actor into a sock and call it art. 11. Marlon Brando hid weights in his pockets to annoy his directors. By the 1960s, Marlon Brando was already a living legend. He had redefined acting with A Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront. But with fame came a strange streak of rebellion and an increasingly bizarre sense of humor. On the set of Mutiny on the Bounty, 1962, Brando's battles with director Lewis Milestone were already infamous. He refused to stick to the script. He showed up late. He added strange vocal inflections just to mess with takes. But the most confounding thing he did? He hid lead weights in his pockets. Milestone couldn't understand why all of Brando's movements looked sluggish and awkward on camera, until the wardrobe department discovered Brando had sewn 15 pounds of fishing weights into his costume. Why? Because Brando wanted his character to move with gravity. And also, allegedly, because he found it funny to frustrate the cinematographer. This wasn't a one-time prank. On The Godfather, Brando famously stuffed tissues and orange slices into his cheeks to play Don Vito Corleone, refusing prosthetics. On other sets, he insisted on reading lines off cue cards taped to walls, other actors' foreheads, or even hidden under coffee cups. He once told a friend, "Acting is too easy. I need to make it interesting for myself." To Marlon Brando, the line between art and absurdity was paper thin, and he delighted in jumping back and forth over it. Number 12. Elizabeth Taylor drank perfume to freshen her breath. Elizabeth Taylor was many things: a two-time Oscar winner, a fashion icon, a wife, 8 times, and a survivor of scandal, heartbreak, and illness. But beyond the diamonds and violet eyes was a woman with habits so unusual, even those closest to her were baffled. One such habit? She drank perfume. According to several assistants and makeup artists, Taylor believed that a tiny sip of her favorite fragrance, usually Bala Versailles or Jean Patou Joy, would leave her breath smelling sweet and alluring. She claimed it gave her a romantic aura, especially during love scenes. "Men remember what they smell," she once quipped. At first, her staff thought she was joking, until they saw her do it regularly, lifting the crystal stopper from the bottle, tipping it lightly to her lips, and swallowing with theatrical grace. Not a gulp. Just a dab, like a deadly aperitif. It wasn't the only strange beauty practice in her routine. Taylor also shaved her face daily to exfoliate dead skin, wore mascara on her eyebrows, and insisted on perfume between her toes. One Hollywood legend whispered Elizabeth Taylor didn't just wear luxury, she ingested it. While modern doctors would raise a red flag, in her era, the Queen of Hollywood operated on her own logic. And for decades, it worked. Because whether she was on screen or off, no one could forget the scent or spectacle of Elizabeth Taylor. 13. James Dean believed his car was cursed, and he was right. James Dean, the brooding icon of Rebel Without a Cause, seemed to know his time was short. Friends recalled that he often spoke of death as if it were just around the corner. But what truly chilled those closest to him was his eerie obsession with his Porsche 550 Spider, the very car he would die in. Dean affectionately called the vehicle Little Bastard. But the name wasn't the only ominous thing about it. From the moment he purchased the sleek silver sports car in 1955, he told friends it gave him a bad feeling. Actor Alec Guinness even warned Dean directly, reportedly saying, "If you get in that car, you'll be dead in a week." 7 days later, Dean was killed in a violent crash on a California highway. But the curse didn't stop there. After the wreck, the car's remains were salvaged and sold for parts. One man who bought the engine was injured in a racing accident. Another, who purchased a set of tires from the vehicle, saw them blow out simultaneously, nearly killing him. A garage storing what remained of the car burned to the ground, with Little Bastard surviving untouched in the rubble. Years later, the remnants of the car disappeared in transit, never seen again. Coincidence? Or was James Dean's final ride truly cursed? Whatever you believe, the legend of Little Bastard remains one of Hollywood's most bone-chilling and documented true stories. At 14, Greta Garbo refused to use public bathrooms. Ever, Greta Garbo was the ultimate enigma. Ethereal, aloof, and famously reclusive, the Swedish-born star captivated audiences with her performances and then walked away from fame at the peak of her career. But behind her mystique was a deeply private and profoundly bizarre fear that few people knew about. She was terrified of public restrooms. This wasn't just diva behavior. Garbo had an intense phobia of germs and contamination. According to her personal assistant and biographers, she refused to use any bathroom that wasn't in her own home or in her private hotel suite, and even then only if she personally inspected it first. While filming, Garbo would reportedly go the entire day without using the restroom, choosing to quietly suffer through discomfort rather than risk stepping into a public lavatory. If absolutely necessary, she would demand an entire dressing trailer be sanitized from top to bottom, sometimes by her own hand. But it didn't stop there. Garbo also avoided shaking hands, sharing food, or touching doorknobs. On more than one occasion, she walked out of restaurants mid-meal if she believed the table hadn't been cleaned properly. A producer once joked, "Garbo doesn't want to be alone. She wants to be alone with disinfectant." While her performances suggested otherworldly calm, inside, she battled anxieties that shaped every aspect of her off-screen life. And when she famously retired in 1941, retreating to a quiet life in New York, many believed she did so not because she was tired of fame, but because she simply couldn't bear to use another studio bathroom. Number 15, Bob Hope, kept a full-size replica of his own head in the closet. Bob Hope was America's favorite wisecracker, a comedian who brought laughter to millions and entertained troops through multiple wars. He was wholesome, witty, and seemingly normal. But inside his Toluca Lake mansion sat one of the most bizarre objects in all of Hollywood, a full-size, hyper-realistic replica of his own head. According to family members and house staff, the head was crafted out of wax, perfectly, down to the wrinkle above his left eyebrow and the dimple in his chin. But it wasn't a movie prop. It wasn't made for Madame Tussauds. It was a personal commission. Why? No one knows for sure. Some say Hope wanted it as a morbid conversation piece. Others whispered that he was planning for all possibilities, including a closed-casket funeral, and wanted something to display. But the most unnerving detail? He kept it in the back of his walk-in closet, facing the door. So when the lights flicked on, you were greeted by Bob Hope's lifeless double, smiling in the dark. Guests who stumbled upon it reportedly screamed. One maid refused to enter the closet ever again. His wife Dolores once joked, "If he loves it more than me, maybe he should marry it." Hope, always the comic, never offered a serious explanation. "It's hard to look good at my age," he quipped. So I had a backup made. Gallows humor? Vanity? Or something more deeply unsettling? Whatever the case, it's one more reminder that even laughter legends can keep the creepiest of secrets. Here comes another shockingly true story, this time involving a glamorous screen queen and the bizarre way she tried to beat the Hollywood system. Number 16. Veronica Lake. Deliberately ruined her hair to end her career. In the 1940s, Veronica Lake was a walking phenomenon. Her trademark peekaboo hairstyle, long, flowing blonde waves that covered one eye, became so iconic it sparked a nationwide trend. Women across America copied it. Magazines praised it. Even cartoons imitated it. But then, seemingly overnight, it was gone. And so was her career. What most fans didn't realize? Lake destroyed her own image on purpose. Tired of being typecast as the sultry seductress and desperate to be taken seriously as an actress, Lake chopped off her hair in the middle of her contract. She didn't warn the studio. She didn't consult her publicist. She just showed up to work with shoulder-length curls and a new attitude. The fallout was immediate. Fans were outraged. The press turned on her. Studio executives were furious, accusing her of sabotaging her own box office draw. One producer reportedly shouted, "We don't pay you to think. We pay you to look like her. And she had the hair." Lake didn't care. In fact, she seemed to enjoy the chaos. But it didn't have the career-liberating effect she hoped for. Roles dried up. She was dropped from contracts. By the 1950s, she was waiting tables in a dive bar in Manhattan. Her fame long vanished, just like the hair that once made her a legend. In her memoir, she wrote, "I lost a career, but I found my dignity." Whether it was empowerment or self-sabotage, one thing is certain: no one else in Hollywood ever weaponized a haircut quite like Veronica Lake. 17. Cary Grant took LSD, under supervision, and loved it. Cary Grant was the embodiment of charm and sophistication. The man in North by Northwest and Charade was cool, poised, and unshakably suave. But what few people knew was that behind the polished persona, Grant struggled with depression, anxiety, and a lifelong sense of emotional detachment. So what did he do about it? He took LSD over 100 times, and he did it on purpose. Beginning in the late 1950s, Grant voluntarily participated in supervised psychedelic therapy sessions in Beverly Hills. At the time, LSD was legal and being studied by psychiatrists as a treatment for trauma and emotional repression. Grant, always curious about psychology, was one of the first major public figures to try it. He described the sessions as life-changing. In one interview, he said, "I learned to accept myself. I felt reborn." But the imagery he described was often terrifying. Visions of floating through his own death, facing demons shaped like childhood fears, or seeing his body dissolve into colors. He would often emerge from sessions in tears, only to return days later for more. His friends were baffled. One director recalled seeing Grant after a session and said, "It was like talking to someone who had just returned from the moon." Grant credited LSD therapy for helping him overcome his insecurities and later advocated for it publicly, until the government criminalized it in the mid-1960s. After that, he never spoke of it again. The world knew Cary Grant as the picture of control, but in truth, he unlocked his inner self through a series of kaleidoscopic, deeply bizarre journeys into the unknown. 18. Rita Hayworth didn't know her real name until she was 18. Rita Hayworth was the red-haired bombshell of the 1940s, a goddess in silk gloves and a face that launched 1,000 pinups. But behind the seductive smile was a haunting truth. She spent the first half of her life not knowing who she truly was. Born Margarita Carmen Cancino, the young actress came from a proud Spanish-American dance family. Her father, Eduardo Cancino, was a strict and ambitious man determined to push his daughter into the spotlight. But when Hollywood came calling, ethnicity was seen as a liability. So the studio system scrubbed her identity clean. Her hairline was painfully electrolysis to give her a more Anglo appearance. Her jet black hair was dyed auburn. Her last name was legally changed to Hayworth. By the time she was 18, the transformation was complete, except for one stunning fact: Rita didn't remember ever choosing it. According to close friends, Hayworth didn't even know her real birth name until an old family friend mentioned it in passing. Her shock was genuine. Her past had been so thoroughly erased by agents and producers that she had come to believe the new identity was natural. I used to be someone else, she reportedly whispered during a photo shoot. But I'm not sure who that was anymore. It wasn't just her name that had been taken. It was her cultural roots, her autonomy, and her ability to define herself. Hollywood gave her the spotlight, but only after reshaping her completely. Rita Hayworth became an icon, but Margarita Cancino was left behind. And now we arrive at the final bizarre tale, perhaps the strangest of them all, a story that blurs the line between grief, obsession, and undying devotion. Number 19, Alfred Hitchcock kept a piece of a corpse on set for inspiration. Alfred Hitchcock was a master of suspense, a genius of psychological horror, but he was also a man with unsettling tastes and a flair for the grotesque, not just on screen, but in real life. While filming The Lodger, 1927, one of his earliest thrillers, Hitchcock allegedly visited the morgue in London to observe dead bodies for inspiration. What he saw, according to production lore, fascinated him so deeply, he did something no studio would dare allow today. He kept a bone fragment from an unclaimed corpse. Accounts differ on whether it was a finger bone, a rib, or a piece of vertebrae, but crew members from later films claimed Hitchcock would carry the fragment in a velvet pouch and occasionally produce it during tense or creatively stuck moments on set. "Do you feel it?" he would say, holding it up to the light. This is fear. It became part of his mystique, a dark talisman. Some thought it was a joke. Others said it was his way of keeping death close, always watching. Even more disturbing, Hitchcock allegedly buried the pouch in the garden of his Bel Air estate before his death, instructing his wife Alma never to dig it up. To Hitchcock, horror wasn't just cinematic, it was spiritual, and he saw death not as something to avoid, but something to study, carry, and even treasure. A prop? A prank? Or the ultimate director's secret? Either way, it's one more reminder that in old Hollywood, the line between performance and reality was sometimes horrifyingly thin. You've seen the photos, the premieres, the legendary smiles frozen in time. But behind that glow, behind the gowns and tuxedos, lurked secrets too strange for fiction. These weren't characters. These were real people, real obsessions, real eccentricities. And yes, real darkness. Hollywood has always tried to polish its legends into something perfect. But as you've just seen, the truth is always messier, always stranger, and always, without fail, more fascinating. These 19 bizarre stories aren't just trivia. They're proof that sometimes the most shocking scripts are the ones life writes itself. Script complete. Would you like me to now write the YouTube description, hashtags, and SEO tags for this video?